Alright. Well, we have a unexpected addition to this episode. I stumbled a little bit on my words there, didn't I? But to begin with, this is obviously hentai. Not a whole lot of those. I guess the back is kind of safe to show. You know, I've got non-hentai that are more risque than that. Everything else in these packages is anime, of the non-hentai variety at least. Okay. But, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, now I know what that one is. I couldn't tell just from the artwork itself. I don't remember the first season too well, and looking at that, I'm like, does that have anything to do with the first season? Are those characters from the first season? They might be. I might be kind of ignorant, forgetting. There we go. Strange stuff. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll begin with the anime. Because, you know, the anime is kind of the reason y'all are here, I assume. Days with my stepsister. Let's see. Regions A and B. Was this English dubbed? Kind of hard to see. Looks like Japanese with subtitles only. If only this camera would focus. Come on, camera, focus. You can focus. You can do it. Yeah, there we go. Japanese, English. Alright. And I remember watching a couple episodes and it seemed to start off fine enough. I didn't keep my something, but you know, it's whatever. We got disc 1, disc 2, it yam what it yam. Next up, steelbook release of Food Wars. Fucking Sentai. They're like, you know what? Some idiots out there are collecting steelbooks of everything, I guess. And I don't know if I'm collecting steelbooks of everything. There's a lot of Studio Ghibli movies that I never got on steelbook that I could, I guess. Maybe I should. English and Japanese, region A. But here I am, buying more of them. That collector in me can't resist. Like it feels like I can resist limited editions, but not steelbooks for some reason. I really should start putting my steelbooks together. The pile of steelbooks is getting large. Next up, we had Tower of God Season 2. I think it's just Season 2. Let's see. Get this off and then go look at the back like I forgot to. Because back here, regions A and B, and there's an English dub, which I think lines up. You've got to rise up to reach the answers. That sounds like what I vaguely remember Tower of God being about. Climbing, wishes, something. Oh. Oh well. And then we got Skin Madox-01 on Blu-ray. And I can't get this plastic started, so we will let the scissor do it for us. Yeah, that's some thicker plastic. We got that off. It's just this plastic on the bottom. Close enough. Who released this? Anime Go. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. English and Japanese dub. That looks like all three regions. It's the power of the arts. the arts that I think are two mechas, but I honestly can't see them too much. The blue through Blu-ray is very mixed. Alright, and then we'll put that down there because finally got my Nintendo Switch 2. You know, make whatever you want of Nintendo and their current legal stuff. I haven't paid too close attention, but I was pretty sure I wanted to Switch 2. Physical dimensions are definitely much bigger, and I guess to kind of help do that, I've got a Switch 1 Joy-Con here, and let's go ahead and it's interesting because, like, instead of sliding on and off, they come in and out, and I think probably you might be able to pull them out, but there's a little trigger here that pushes it out. And these are much bigger Joy-Cons. I mean, not like monstrously bigger, but if you're used to this little thing being in your hand, and, you know, I might not have the biggest hands, but even I kind of like curling around these things and just kind of, I don't know, something. Yeah, Switch 2 has that, and as you can probably guess, I've got a couple other off the side here so that you can kind of, you know, compare it to the other Switches over the ages. Because here's an OLED Switch 1. As you can see, the Switch 2 is a lot bigger. A lot bigger. And the OLED was, you know, dimensionally the same as the launch Switch, but more of the physical real estate dedicated to the screen. And, you know, I've got a Switch Lite here for comparison to all this stuff. Pretty cool stuff. Yeah, I guess I got quite a bit of hardware. I'm not a hardware collector, but I know me having that much seems different. I've got some accessories for this. I haven't really done much. I wasn't planning to have it. It's just that Amazon all of a sudden switched from invite mode to, oh, we just have it in stock now as of last Thursday, so I didn't even plan to have it for today. So, one thing I did get was a GameStop charging grip. This thing's actually really quite neat. It kind of shows you a little bit of the difference. So, like, if the previous Joy-Cons kind of had rails, these ones do have a little plug on the inside. So if I, like, take these out, in order for these to be able to charge, what GameStop has done is they've created this thing that comes together like that. They plug in like that. It's very high-tech. I thought it was pretty cool. Thought I would at least show that to y'all because why not? Now, as you can see, you know, the Switch's iconic chink thing, which it physically did from a hardware perspective, is good, but yeah, there's that. So far, I don't have any actual Switch 2 games. I've only fired up Animal Crossing and Pokemon Violet, but seeing Pokemon Violet in 60 frames per second is kind of crazy, yo. Let me actually press the right button. I'm not used to the fact that there's two buttons there. I'm not even sure if this camera can pick up that this is running in a smooth 60 frames per second. I guess, well, I've got this fired up. It's probably good to mention to y'all to, if you've played Pokemon, to probably be Pokemoned up, because as of this weekend, so you can log on to get your Treasures of Ruin shiny versions on Mystery Gift right now, and coming this Friday, a bunch of stores across the world, GameStop here in the US, Pokemon stores in Japan will have the shiny versions of Koraidon and Miraidon. One of each per game, the opposite of whatever your version box art is, or something like that. So, I guess we have that. But, let's go ahead and end this segment. Here's this week's Physical Anime Collection update. Alright. Well, okay, we got a lot of anime I watched, a lot of final episodes for a lot of seasons and series and stuff. And then I have on the side upcoming stuff. I'm not sure I'm going to mention absolutely everything, but, well, let's just start talking. First of all, we had Reborn as a Vending Machine, Season 2, Episode 12, which I guess ended this season. It was an ending. It wasn't as spectacular as I guess it could have been, but you know, it's kind of along the lines of what you would expect from Reborn as a vending machine. Neat things in there, but ultimately it's sort of just... I guess it just sort of is, whatever. Clevatus, episode 12. I think there were some actual real touching moments that happened in here. I also highly appreciate the fact that it wasn't a rushed ending. It pretty much calls itself the end of a chapter. But it's not like an end of a chapter, now y'all will never see the series again. I kind of hope we see chapter 2. I'm kind of curious what they're going to do with certain elements of it, because there were some things about the first season setup that would be weird without them. But I don't think it's going to continue on to the next season, so I guess I don't know what further Clevatus would look like, but I'm hoping for more. Onyo Kaiten Rebirth Verse, episode 12. This one was definitely an ending to the show. And overall, I think it's okay. There are certain elements of it that were fine. I think it's doing some of the motions it needs to do, and in certain ways it doesn't completely feel fresh. I think it has some of that same anime freshness where sometimes you can watch something that's just like anime normal, but it's just like it still feels very different from the other things. Like, it doesn't feel like copy and paste or anything like that. It's something that I wouldn't be surprised if people just really, really loved it. You know, people have probably seen a lot of this stuff before, probably don't care as much for it. There are a couple of things I don't think were explained very well. But ultimately, you know, it was, you know, I think a neat thing to have watched. Rising of the Shield Hero, Season 4, Episode 11. Continuing to do okay stuff. Interesting stuff going on. But I'm not sure what to think about all of it. But it could end up being something particularly notable. We'll just have to see what the next episode does, because I have certain thoughts. But I guess we'll see how it pans out. Reincarnated as the Seventh Prince, Season 2, Episode 23. What happened in this one? That happened... I remember neat stuff. I just don't remember if I have... Do I remember what happened? It didn't end, did it? Didn't think so. Huh. Okay. Okay. I remember some bits and pieces of what happened. But maybe not what happened at the very, very end, to see what I should be waiting for this coming week. But I'm pretty sure there's something. Maybe even the name of an episode, but it didn't get subtitles or something like that. Oh well. Stuff. Welcome to the Outcast Restaurant, episode 12. I guess it was an end. If I had any complaint about it, it set things up as if there should or could be a season 2, when I didn't think this is a show that necessarily needed to. Which is kind of some of the problem with the show itself, where it feels like the theming is sort of there, but muddied. And there's certain elements of what happened at the end that I'm like, why does this not also apply to the bad guy as well? It feels one of those things where it's just like the show had an idea, but unlike something like Dragon Ball Z where there's multiple ways to become a Super Saiyan, including just being children born of Saiyans that have figured out how to go Super Saiyan and now they just kind of know. Really weird stuff. But I don't know. Again, I'm not quite sure why some of this reasoning only applied to our main character. Oh well. It was okay. Dan to Dan Season 2, Episode 24. Fun episode. I'm not sure if the theming is there, but the randomness and high quality stuff it does is, you know, fun in its way. I guess I look forward to seeing some of the weird random stuff it does, but I guess as a show, I don't feel too drawn in. But, you know, I talk about things that are just like, what are the themings going on? How does it all come together? And there's some elements of Dun 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 that do feel kind of tied together in that regard in certain ways, but in other ways, it just really feels like there's a lot of excuses to do some incredibly random stuff. Including at the very end, a possible season cliffhanger sort of thing. Anyways, fun episode. Water Magician episode 11. Okay, so half of this episode was spent talking about the backstory of another character and completely focusing on that, and that was bad. And I say this because, like I said, sometimes there could be a big major event happening and you kind of appreciate what it's doing those because you know it's setting something up for our main character to be a part of that stuff. And I guess I see what they may be setting up for episode 12, possibly. But in order to do it, they had to go really far away from our main character. Like, even before, when there was the dungeon thing happening, our main character, we got to see kind of his fun slice of lifey sort of stuff. I think a bit toned down compared to other parts of the show, but it was still enough that it was enjoyable. But this one, it's setting up something big and setting up a whole lot of backstory for other characters, and it dedicated like an entire half an episode where, even worse, it wasn't even necessarily good backstory, I would say. Sorry, feels like there's like a piece of hair in my mouth or something. It's a problem with long hair like this. It goes places you're not expecting. But yeah, what was I saying? I lost my train of thought because of feeling of itchiness here. Anyways, that's right. I was talking about it had the backstory for the character, but it also was kind of bad backstory for once. Like, I'm not sure this show's really had any good backstory because it hasn't done much backstory. But for this Oscar character, it's sort of like some of it is a little too coincidental, somewhat. Some of the dialogue and interactions is a little too on the nose and not necessarily... Do I feel like these are the actions of bandits that are living, thinking, breathing people? You know, you can kind of get away with that for dungeon monsters because, you know, what drives some of them is strange. And then you'll have ones that are above and beyond in some way. And it's like, well, maybe the rules are just different. The other ones are sort of manifestations that can only have one-track minds or something like that. But for random bandits, I don't know, weird thoughts in there that definitely made the quality of the show seem lower, and even worse, it was doing it during a storytelling for somebody else that we don't care about yet, and while maybe it's setting it up so that we would care about it, I don't feel like the backstory was worth the effort. Maybe it's just kind of padding to figure out how to get the material to end at the right moment. Whatever's about to happen in episode 12 here, I guess. Dr. Stone, Science Future, Season 4, Part 2, Episode 23. I really like this episode. It kind of got back to some of the spirit of the way the show began. This sort of scientific discovery sort of thing, but it was told from a very different perspective. And while it didn't really cover new ground, so to speak, I think it covered a lot of existing ground in a from a super fucking fresh perspective. I think I might have even teared up just a little bit at the end of that episode. So, I'd say a good episode. And probably one more before this Season 4 ends, and I guess we'll have to see what it brings us. Next up, Secrets of the Silent Witch, Episode 11. Fuck that guy, but I guess this was about some form of our main character's reconciliation with some portions of her past that were introduced rather recently, and doesn't cut to the core of her traumas or anything like that, but didn't feel like it ended in a way where there was a cliffhanger. So if the next episode is the last episode, then it doesn't feel like it's going to be anything that really ends the show, which I'm not surprised. This one strikes me as something that could be a couple seasons if it wanted to be. Could probably get away with it too. There's a lot of good character material in there, I think. And I sort of feel like if they did pull something for an end, maybe if they had 2 more episodes, maybe they could pull something that actually feels interesting. But I sort of feel like the timing for that isn't right. So I'm not sure what to make of whatever's about to come next. Unless episode 11 was supposed to be the last episode. That's always possible as well. But I was expecting like it to go to episode 12. There were technically 12 episodes because it was one recap episode. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to see. Let's see. Kaiju number 8. Season 2, episode 22. This was an interesting mix of an episode. Like I said, I kind of don't like how a whole lot of this show has not been about Kaiju number 8, the titular character. And, you know, I said this before. If you're going to give me a show where you're going to have a main character, well, I want to know why I want to be watching the story from their perspective. Whether it's they bring a weird oddball sense of comedy to things, or they change people's view of the world, or they change a situation or something like that. You know, I kind of want to see that from a main character, especially when the series is named after them, which is why Naruto is a bit of a disappointment, and why the pain arc is actually pretty spectacular, because, you know, you'll watch most of Naruto, it's like, okay, it seems to be kind of being about some of these themes, but not really about how our main character and those themes are super connected. It just kind of gives a half-hearted response. And the pain arc of Naruto felt like it finally tackled things fucking head on, and it did so brilliantly. Kaiju number 8, you know, this episode is obviously not doing that, and this show in general just hasn't been distracted from whatever it's been doing. But this season feels like it's been distracted working up to something which doesn't belong to our main character per se. We got little hints that's like, okay, they're keeping these things in mind, but do we really feel it? And to some degrees, I don't think we feel that. But I do feel like this episode was a bit redeeming, because while there were 2 neat things about it, I guess, and I don't really want to spoil it and say what those were, but chances are, if you know what's introduced in this episode, you're like, okay, yeah, that was cool. That was fucking awesome, entertaining. And I don't know how to get around it, but, you know, it kind of had both of those going for it. One of those weird coincidence sort of things at the very beginning, but whatever, it's fine, whatever. Again, not sure what to make of all of it. Especially since, like, the part that I talked about this episode that was the most enjoyable element of it, I feel like barely connects to our titular character, Kaiju number 8. Like, it sort of half does with one of the characters involved in all of that, but it doesn't at all with another, and so that kind of makes it sort of like a quarter involved, which kind of is similar to how one of these people was getting, you know, the direct friend of our main character was getting stronger, and the friend of the friend was helping that friend get stronger, and the friend of the friend isn't as interesting because you're getting kind of disjointed from the main story. It's still maybe circled around, but I digress. So, you know, an interesting episode. Again, with its pluses and minuses. Shy Hero and the Assassin Princesses, episode 12. I guess a kind of touching episode to end a season with. I don't know if there's a super strong feeling of theming going on, but in terms of elements a little bit deeper than the basic premise that were introduced, I felt like it leaned on one of them pretty well. The other ones have been leaned on a bit better. I'm not sure what I would expect from a second season, but, you know, what did happen was entertaining enough. Summer Hikaru Died, episode 11. I guess we're learning a lot more information about stuff. I'm not entirely sure what to think of where this show I would expect it to end or what to do. So in a certain way, it's kind of lost me a little bit. Not enough that I would say I'm not going to watch it, but it is one of those things where I mentioned that, like, it started off with this good, strong horror vibe, but it really hasn't been about the horror vibe. It just kind of has had it here and there. It's been a bit more about the characters' relationship, but it's trying to mix the two, and in that regard, as it's kind of gone on, while it's doing interesting things, it's kind of reaching a point where it's just like, I don't know what to feel about a whole lot of it. Oh well. I'll still try to give it a finish, especially since there's not a lot of other things to watch this week, probably. Ugly Mug Epic Fighter, episode 12. Overall, I guess it was okay. I think the main problem with it is kind of similar to the problem I was talking about with Summer Hikaru Died, but probably a little bit worse, where I feel like Ugly Mug had some good themes and ideas it was playing with, but I don't know, somehow any kind of messaging they might have wanted to do got muddied, messed up, kind of crazy, I guess. And it didn't end things, but at the same time, it's like I mentioned, it tried to make it a bit more personal, tried to give more reason for it to feel like that, but it didn't really feel like the setup, the story as it progressed, etc., was that. Like, maybe got a little distracted by some certain things, and kind of did just certain things that are just like, yeah, do this because this is cool. But I don't know if it felt like it stayed on theme, I guess. So, if it's rated lowly, it's probably because, it probably had good ideas, but just didn't quite know how to do something spectacular with them, possibly. I'm not sure if we got the last episode of Apocalypse Bringer Minogra, or at least the first season or first core, whatever we have here. But we definitely had something. Something I would call kind of bullshit, mostly because there's an element of this where... So, like, the thing that's been interesting about this show is it's been a 4X strategy game, fantasy isekai resurrection, and it's done an interesting play beyond that where you've got other things where it's kind of representing classic RPGs, for example. But the problem is, to a certain degree, it should be Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior it's referencing, but it's referencing concepts beyond that which feel like they wouldn't be the base. But okay, there are additional games beyond that first one. Maybe it's mechanics from some of those, but some of those also just feel like some of the things they're playing with here are just like, I don't see people doing that sort of thing in a game. And had a lot of thoughts, and I don't want to reveal too much because I don't want to reveal what happens in the episode, but to a certain degree it's just like, okay, yeah, some of what it's doing is interesting, but at the same time it's weird that, I don't know, it feels like it's adding elements to fundamental concepts of foundational RPGs that wouldn't really be there, either for mechanical reasons or because it's incredibly bad gameplay design, in my opinion. Yeah, and the reason I'm hesitating is because I'm trying to make sure what I'm saying can be reconcilable with my opinions on Final Fantasy VII, which also had similar sort of things. But I think for Final Fantasy VII, that worked out mostly because it was tightly tied into the story and not something that was a cheap as fucking hell. I mean, it makes the game that they're referencing, the game within the world or something that inspired some of this original stuff, seem pathetic and not the sort of thing that would have been famous. But I don't know. Most of that is because, they can just choose to reveal that at any time. So it feels like it's also cheap from the point of view, from a storytelling perspective in this, because it's just like, this isn't a staple of all these games. And in fact, again, I think people would consider those to be bad storytelling moves and not, oh, this is a great game because of this sort of thing. So it's like, then why the fuck is it in this anime? Because coincidence. Now, the things they did with it are intriguing and curious and seem to be playing with whatever the show considers its fundamental underlying mechanics, and interesting and disturbing things happened. And I think that's good. This show kind of has had elements of that through it, and if this is the final episode of the season or core or something like that, that's good for them to have. It probably wouldn't be good from the perspective of it's a little too cliffhangery, maybe. But, I would be looking forward to an episode 13. If I didn't get an episode 13 and we got an entire another season, I would be pretty happy with that. I enjoyed what we got. A lot of complicated thoughts on that one. Gachiakuta, episode 11. This one is definitely falling a little bit. So, this show kind of is on this balancing point where, as I say, there's a lot of really neat things that happen in it, but at the same time, from a storytelling perspective, I worry that it's deviating too far from telling a story about why the main character being present here is interesting. It sometimes feels like this show gets a little lost in its own world. This happened with the previous episode, I feel, a little bit. Like, I think it's cool stuff, and probably people enjoy it, and not bad to make, but for me personally, it just sort of feels like a distraction where they're kind of showing off their world a little bit, as opposed to showing off their character, their story idea. What does it all mean? And maybe there's some elements of this that kind of tie into that, but at the same time, it feels like it also undermined it in a way that feels like it's really an excuse to prop up one of their characters and show us more about them, kind of. So we'll have to see. We have an entire another core, I guess, because this is a 2-core thing, because I see that this continues into the next anime season. But, those are my thoughts on this episode. Sword of the Demon Hunter, Season 1, Part 2, Episode 23. Penultimate episode of this season. Yeah, penultimate episode of this season. And an interesting twist. I didn't expect it based on what happened at the end of the previous episode. I figured it was going to do something related to that. And it may still be related to that. But I forgot how chill this show chooses to be sometimes when it feels like any other show would have been ramping up the action. It's neat, but I'm not sure what to think about it. Overall, I would say it's been a pleasant 2 cores, a pleasant season with very neat moments, but hard to really know what to think about all of it. I don't know. I do know that sometimes I don't talk about all the things that I fire up and rewatch, but I did feel like poking around some, Bach Theory Diaries, because, just random scenes from that one are really fucking fun. But also Freerun. And, Freerun is just really... Every time I go back to that, I appreciate the fact that that's a show that knows, okay, we've named this show after a character. Here's why it's interesting to see things from there. They can have moments for other characters that are hugely triumphant moments. Sometimes it can get distracted by other characters a little bit, just to kind of keep things in perspective. But it does so knowing that Freerun's the person we're really watching. So even when it tends to make other characters shine, usually it's doing so in a way that allows us to appreciate the main character. I think I've mentioned this before. We're like, Stark. Or do they pronounce it Stark? I think they pronounce it Stark in the English dub. I don't know what they say in the Japanese dub, because I maybe haven't listened too closely. And maybe they can't pronounce German as eloquently as whoever did the English dub, because a lot of things in it are German. But, Stark is a really good one, because it's just like, we get a lot of his first introduction and us learning about what's actually really neat about him, but it's done so in a way where we can appreciate it because of what Freerun brings to the table. And I've probably mentioned this before, and I don't know. I just appreciate it as a show. It does a good job of telling a story. Maybe it's not entirely sure what the ending will be like, but it's good. Is there anything else to bring up? I haven't been playing much Dead by Daylight. The chapter comes out this week. I did mention the Pokemon stuff. I have not been playing a lot of that. I've mostly just been enjoying putting my VR chat avatar back on. I kind of want to start updating it again, make it do things smoother, better. I have ideas, thoughts, but I would have to get it up to date first. But, okay, that's all a bunch of stuff. Good for all that. Let's talk about stuff that's airing, because I think we even have stuff that starts this coming week. I'm not sure of everything that starts, but I know that, like, High Dive has an episode 0 of a show starting. And there may be one or two other things that start that are on my list. It's interesting that High Dive this time actually has 3 shows that I'm kind of curious about. You know, they got their hands on more isekai fantasy schlop. And I'm calling it that. It might not necessarily be that bad. But I say that acknowledging that, you know, it's not necessarily the best things in the world that I do tend to enjoy. But, you know, they got their hands on 3 of them, which is good for them. It feels like this gives them a chance to stay relevant. And I think people have been complaining about Crunchyroll lately, so yeah, it's good in that regard. We do have additional seasons of a lot of stuff. So there's the final season of My Hero Academia, which I don't know how much the dub will be delayed, but probably at a certain point I will definitely be watching that with my Friday friend, because, you know, he probably wants to finish that show as well. Tales of Wedding Rings, Season 2. Not that Season 1 was particularly great. It would have been an interestingly okay show if it was just the one season kind of paced the way I mentioned, where it did what it did. But I forget exactly how Season 1 ended, but it definitely didn't end in a way where it was over. And now we will have Season 2. I think I remember certain things. But I guess we got Season 2 now, so we get to see it. So hopefully there'll be a conclusion to it, because I don't feel like it's a show that should go on for too much longer, per se. I mean, maybe they have storytelling stuff to do, but I do sort of feel like if they're not careful, even if they planned a Season 3 or beyond, it would be very easy for Season 2 to feel like it's the true end of... like, the true end of fresh material, maybe. And we'll just have to see. Spy Family Season 3. So that means one of my priorities this week is to finish the last 2 episodes of Spy Family that I haven't watched, and to watch that movie. I think the movie may not be canonly in between, but it was released between them, so I didn't want to make sure I'm caught up on all that stuff. We have 3rd season of To Your Eternity, which kind of surprised me. Season 2 sort of felt like a... maybe not an ending to everything, but an ending to a conflict that had been around since the 1st season. And it had such a weird ending that it was trying to fast forward through something. Like maybe they didn't figure out the pacing for Season 2, and so they just kind of had to end it really fast. Or something like that. Or they ran out of money and they're like, okay, we have to cram 2 episodes into 1 episode or something. I don't know. But 3rd season's coming out, so I guess we'll have to see that. Campfire Cooking in Another World with My Absurd Skill, Season 2. You know, looking forward to that. It was a fun 1st season. I definitely hope that the cooking quality is still up there. I certainly hope that... I think her name was Sue the Slime. I think they're all named Sue. Is still the most adorable thing ever. Fenrir, I hope, is as awesome as he's always been. You know. So, looking forward to seeing if Season 2 continues some of what made Season 1 fun. And then, I also have note that One Punch Man Season 3 is airing, although it looked like it was on Hulu. Which, you know, I've got a lot of question marks next to it because I'm like, well, how am I going to watch it? Because I'm not really planning on getting a Hulu subscription. I don't know. Maybe I'll think about that as it comes along. Other than that, a lot of the other stuff I think I've mentioned before. A couple of Villainous, Past the Monster Meet Milady, Isekai Fantasy, Schlop. Could be a fun next season. I'm guessing we probably won't get Potion Ogami wo Tasukeru, because it sounds like that's a short form. It looks medieval fantasy-esque, maybe medieval fantasy, isekai, something related to potions, but short form shows like this tend to not get picked up as easily. So maybe I won't get to see that, but yeah, that's fine. I don't know what Monster Strike Deadverse Reloaded is. I'm not sure if I care about the name as much, but I guess something about the KV I'm keeping my eye on. But that's like so deep into this season that who knows when it's airing. I don't know. Anyways, a lot of stuff, you know. It starts trickling in this next week while other stuff from the previous season trickle out as well. So, things to look forward to. And again, you know, Pokemon stuff this coming weekend. DVD release of the Karuse? Kraso? I forget. Once I see it enough and see how its name is pronounced, I'll probably have a good idea. But yeah, that one coming out. Tambourine perk coming out for Survivor. Hope the Myers rework is, or the tweaks to the Myers rework turn out good. They're going to try and make his Evil Within 3, whatever they're calling it now, more lunge-like than it currently is, because it was supposed to be. It was always supposed to be. You just have some brain-rotted people decided to start calling it Dash Slop. Because they... Anyways. And then on Pokemon, Shiny releases. I've got my Shiny Treasures of Ruin, so hopefully I'll figure out the GameStop stuff this coming weekend. Figure out what Switch 2 games I'm going to purchase. Yeah. Fun stuff. Alright, I think I'm done babbling. Thanks for being here with me. Y'all, have a nice week.